The superheroes have had enough of minimum wage, no benefits, no 401k plans, and being forced to pay high taxes. They decide to protest the unfair circumstances, and surprisingly, the villains support their cause. Villains are strange creatures, because you're never quite sure where you stand with them. One day you're at each other's throats, ready to tear one another apart, and the next you're arm in arm, pushing back a cosmic threat. After all, even if they're evil, they still share the same Earth as the heroes, which means most have an investment in keeping it safe. This investment in the status quo also shifted to politics, with some villains even joining the protest against the unfair working conditions that the heroes were facing. Notable names like the Barroom Strangler, Mr. Badfist and Shannon Boom made an appearance, causing quite a stir as these veterans of the evil game shook hands and did the PR that was usually reserved exclusively for heroes. You would think that the public would hate the people that were often using their cars as ballistic missiles in street brawls, but there was something so captivating about a villain that made people often forgot that these same people were indisputably wicked. After days of protesting, an agreement was made, and the villains left, followed shortly by most of the heroes. The government's a cruel machine, and instead of giving benefits to all heroes, they only gave it to the top 10%, reasoning that these were the real protectors of the city, not the cannon fodder that made up the other 90%. That's why Flowery Nicky still roamed the national park, his sign held high as he begged for the public's attention. Every hero deserves rights. He chanted, hearing no voices following behind him. He used to have a group of rookies protesting alongside him, but with each passing day, their numbers had thinned, until Nick was the only one left. So, now it was just Flowery Nicky walking through the park, unable to draw people's attention away from a flock of ducks that were fighting over bread scraps. Nick lowered his sign and sighed, before pulling off his sunflower mask, staring at it with a grimace. He hated that sweat smell that cheap masks got. He took a breath, ready to put it back on, only to jump when a voice sang out behind him. "Careful, little sunflower. You don't want a nasty villain seeing you without your mask, do you?" Thorn smirked, the plant-based villain leaning against a nearby bench, giving him a wave. "It would be nice if someone saw me," Nicky said, slipping his mask back on. "How are you?" Normally villains and heroes weren't so chummy, but since they both relied on plants as their superpower, the two had grown a mutual respect of sorts, often pulling their punches around one another. Well, Thorns pulled her punches. She was the veteran. Good, good. Found out you can convince a Venus flytrap to eat human meat. Who would have thought? She laughed, only to see Nicky tense up in fear. Relax, it didn't kill anybody. It just took a bite out of some hero. Thorn seeing such a thing as a small workplace accident, no worse than accidentally cutting yourself with scissors. Nicky grimaced, hoping it didn't take too big of a bite out of the hero. He also wondered where he would prefer to get bitten if he had a choice. A finger maybe? Thigh? Somewhere that would heal quickly. He concluded, only to notice the silver-haired villain staring at him, peering down at him through her sunglasses. "You all right, Sunflower? You were just staring off into space." "Yes, sorry. I'm tired." Nicky slipped off his mask, not seeing any reason to hide his identity around her. For a villain, Thorns was all right in Nicky's eyes. Plus, she never saw a reason to hide her identity around him, so why should he feel the need to be uptight? He felt strange without his mask, as if this was the first time the two had actually ever had a conversation on a civilian level. No heroic words, no villainous plans, just two people talking. "I thought you would be rolling in benefits. Didn't you hear, Sunflower? Heroes are getting a pay rise. Also, health benefits. So, next time someone like me puts you in the hospital, we won't need to send flowers as an apology. You'll still need to send flowers. Those benefits are only for the top 10 heroes. The rest of us still have to pay. According to the people that pass the law, we aren't heroic enough to deserve them." Thorn's expression twisted into one of disgust, adding wrinkles to her already aged face. "They didn't tell us that. So, who's looking after the little sunflowers? What happens to the rookies? Guess we die. Either to debt or injuries." Nicky would have laughed if it weren't so depressing. Even worse, Axel Grind recently got a hole punched through him. He was in the top 10% when he got injured, so he should have been covered, right? One would assume so, yes. Well, when he put in his claim, they told him his rank had dropped because he lost the battle he got injured in, and since he wasn't in the top 10%, they wouldn't cover him anymore. No retirement money, no hospital cover, nothing. "I started an online funding campaign for him, but it's not going well," Nicky admitted. Thorns patted the rookie's shoulder, shaking her head. "You've got the heart of a hero, kid. I never understood why people like you never get those godly powers, instead they're given to some idiot that runs around calling themselves Captain Amazing or something stupid like that. Tell you what. I'm going to join your little protest." Snatching his sign, Thorns walked through the park, stopping by a group of people. With a small exhale, she surrounded the park with vines, enclosing it in darkness. The people inside panicked, clawing at the vines, unable to break through their multiple layers. Nicky rushed over to confront her, only for a vine to grab his waist, holding him still. "Tell the cops I have some demands. I want that law to be amended. If it isn't changed by midnight tonight, everyone's dying. Run along, little sunflower, before you end up dead," she teased, having no intention of killing him. The wall of vines opened, throwing Nicky onto the street. At first, Nicky went against her, trying to control the vines that surrounded the park, though no matter how hard he focused, he couldn't break her influence. After 10 minutes of trying to overpower her control, he fell to his knees, panting. Incredible. The words slipped from his lips, praising her powers. She had the entire park surrounded and could still keep him from breaking a small hole in her wall. She really was a legend. When Nikki informed the police about the hostage situation, they did their usual tactic of referring the request to a representative of the local politicians before contacting any heroes in the area, demanding they come and sort the situation out. It was never a good look if politicians gave in to villains' demands, so they always tried to forcefully remove the situation before entertaining the idea of giving in to demands. The newly paid pros rushed to the scene, only to find it wasn't just thorns blocking their path. The veteran villains had gathered again, this time with a lot more vigor. No longer were they marching hand in hand with the heroes. They were standing in defiance against the ones that protected the legislation. With so many heroes and villains gathered together, it became clear that any fight would level half the city, if not the state. Calculating the costs of mass destruction, versus supplying the rest of the heroes with benefits, the government folded, giving in to the demands. When everything settled, there was that typical ceasefire that occurred after a massive gathering of heroes and villains. The type of ceasefire where the heroes looked away while the villains ran off. No one wanting to reignite tensions by arresting someone. Nikki waited by the park entrance, waving at Thorns, who turned her head, looking elsewhere. Oh. Had he tricked himself into believing they were friends, or at least frenemies? It stung to be ignored, especially by someone he looked up to. Thank you. He called out. Even if she didn't look his way, he still didn't want her to leave without his thanks. The heroes all looked at Nikki, trying to figure out who he was talking to. Thorns continued to stare up at a flock of birds, walking in Nikki's direction, bumping into his shoulder. She paused after the contact, staring down at him. We have to keep up appearances in public, little sunflower. You're welcome. Keep doing the right thing, so I can keep doing the wrong thing. She slipped him a piece of paper before grinning. Bump into me again and I'll hang you with my thorns. Nikki screamed when she shouted, not expecting it, getting the exact reaction she wanted. The other heroes glared at her, stepping between Nikki and Thorns, losing any suspicions they had that Nikki may have played some unintentional part in all of this. Nikki examined the paper as she walked off, seeing what was written inside. Try working with the plants, not against them. You can't force nature, you have to work with it. You were too focused on overpowering me when you could have asked the vines to move for you. Regardless, I would have been able to keep you away, even if you had broken past my barrier. Keep training and if you need any tips, you can ask me for them the next time we run into each other. Nikki slipped the paper into his pocket, smirking. He had to resist the urge to thank her again, not wanting to destroy her earlier performance. So, he added to it, next time I'm going to show you who's the better plant-wielding person. Looking forward to it.